Welcome to Game Theorem, where we have serious discussions about absurd entertainment.
Before we get into today's episode, I just wanted to mention that we have a Patreon up now, and if anyone would like to help donate and support us and see the rewards you get for doing it, we have a link in the description. Kira, I want to ask you a question.
Okay.
So, I want to ask, is the production of art worth it if it causes the suffering of the artist or others involved in making it? I feel like this is a nuanced and complicated issue, right? So I wanted to understand how
No. It's not nuanced and complicated at all. The answer is no. It's not worth it.
Fine then.
And that was Game Theorem. I'm Kyle.
Bye.
I'm Kira. Bye.
Well, you said my name. We're switching. I'm Kira. I'm kidding. No, I'm Kyle.
I'm Kira.
And that's what we're talking about today. So, a bit of a trigger warning. We're going to have a bit of language and some mature themes and whatnot in this episode because it's going to be kind of a dark topic.
Yeah, it will be.
And also what we wanted to do in this Wide Look episode is kind of a rebuttal. We listen to tons of other podcasts. Mm-hmm. And there's this one podcast that we were listening to. What was it, Kira?
Behind the Bastards.
Yes, very popular podcast. 100,000 times the views that we get, listens, whatever. And that podcast talks about infamous people throughout history, oftentimes ones that aren't really known for their infamy, but based on their actions, they should.
Yeah, exactly.
And they had this one over a guy called Alfred Hitchcock. He's this famous director and whatnot. And they talked about all the terrible things that he's ever done. And truly, I see why they put him on the list. But the thing that really upset us, right, Kira?
Yeah, it really bothered me too.
Which was? Was
that they kept commenting about how good or how
genius his art was.
Yeah.
All of his movies, like Psycho, right?
Yeah, and The Birds.
Yeah. He made many of what are probably considered the best films of all time, at least within like classic cinema for cinemaphiles. Mm-hmm. But they said it in a way that almost kind of excused it. Not entirely. I mean, they did list him as one of the most evil people of all time. But I felt like there was a lot of excusing going along, saying like, well, we did get art out of it. Is it worth it? And I'm just like, that's an equivocal no. Right?
Yeah.
So we wanted to actually talk about this entire subject in particular, and we'll get back to that guy specifically. But we felt like this was a really good idea to talk about of suffering in art.
Mm-hmm. Because a lot of people romanticize that. It's specifically like romanticize that, in order to make great art, you have to suffer in life or else you won't make great art, and it's stupid.
And I feel like that argument's used for art is kind of the same argument as making someone suffer for like the means justify the ends.
Oh, yeah, I see what you mean. If you could use that excuse for art, then you could probably use it for other things.
I mean, any company, like, we got to make money. We got to increase our productivity. We got to make a good product. We have to be number one in the retail industry, whatever. You could say, well, the suffering is worth it. Mm-hmm. I feel like that's no different than art. The only thing with art is people say that art has like an intrinsic invaluable type of value that will affect generations and a potentially infinite number of people to come. And therefore, while those other things sound evil and inhumane, art, I feel like, still is given this lofty idea of being worth other people's suffering.
Yeah. And, preventing the suffering of even one person is far more important than any art that suffering may produce.
I like to think about what a world would be like if this wasn't a controversial idea, if people just were like, yeah, totally, have suffering. Could you imagine all the people that would suffer in the creative industries around the world routinely just because we'll get good art out of it?
Oh, well, they already do.
In large part, maybe we can talk about character actors. No, not character art. What are the ones when they get really into it? Method actors.
Yeah.
Yes.
Maybe we could talk about that, but all right. We also have other industries where like people really do suffer to make the art. But let's keep going. Like I was saying earlier, people will argue that the suffering is just the cost of the art. Like the art is worth it. This is just the cost of it. And it's like, if that's the cost, then the cost is too much. You lose more than you gain from getting that art.
Yeah, because I mean, you're putting a value on other people's happiness and enjoyment.
Exactly. You're putting value on other people's lives.
And isn't the whole point of art to bring people happiness? Even if the art is sad and it makes them feel sadness, their experience is richer for it, right? They enjoyed that art. Mm-hmm. But if people had to suffer to make it, I feel like that really taints it. You come out as a net negative instead of a net positive, like I think people fool themselves into thinking.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I mean, we've talked about death of the author before, and it's still art. Like, you can't say it isn't art just because of the suffering.
Yeah, that's one thing we wanted to distinguish.
Yeah, is that it's still art, but that doesn't mean that art is worth it.
Right. Like for example, you could probably still hold up a lot of Hitchcock's art, like Psycho and whatnot, as good movies. And I mean, I don't want to take that away from you unless we're going to actually argue the merits of the movie itself. Mm-hmm. I don't want to take that away because just because I don't think it was worth it doesn't mean it doesn't now exist. I just don't think we should perpetuate this. If we lived in a world that didn't have Psycho, well, I guess we'll get into the suffering that went into that movie and some other movies. But
yeah,
if there's a problematic piece of art like that caused a lot of suffering, I would not mind living in a world where that suffering didn't happen. The art being lost is nothing to me. Mm-hmm. Because that's tainted art in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, like, for people who don't know about the suffering, they can just enjoy the art, whatever. But if you know what went into that, like, it taints your enjoyment of the art.
Yes.
How can you separate that suffering from the art, you know?
Yeah, it's kind of like when we talked on the Death of the Author podcast. You could kind of separate it, but there's like a connection still, you know?
Yeah.
It's nuanced.
But the connection is stronger, I feel, if you directly know the suffering that it caused.
I feel like they're two different sides of a scale, and one weighs more than the other, and suffering is a very heavy thing to put on that scale.
Absolutely.
Here's an example. The pyramids of Egypt, right? Mm-hmm. Specifically the Great Pyramid of Giza, but there's many others as well, right? Mm-hmm. Now, let's say that those pyramids, as like a lot of people think in popular culture, were built by slaves, mm-hmm. right? Imagine the amount of slaves and the amount of lifetimes, right? You got hundreds, thousands of people working on these pyramids over generations before they're able to be completed, right? Mm-hmm. Imagine how much suffering goes into that. Mm-hmm. Now, we may today look at those pyramids as one of the 7 wonders of the world. But I have to ask you, listeners, imagine all that suffering of all those people. Don't you think that maybe it would be worth it to sacrifice ever having the pyramids in exchange for all those thousands and thousands of people to be given the chance at a better life because they wouldn't have to be doing that?
Also, you realize that a lot of those people just died. They were worked to death.
Well, we're actually going on an assumption because it turns out that the whole thing of the people building the pyramids being slaves is actually kind of a myth.
Oh, really?
A lot of them were actually paid.
Oh, I see.
I mean, I think they did have slaves too. I'm not entirely sure, but I know that it wasn't just like 100% slave workforce.
Well, yeah, I would think that they would have paid the architects and like some of the more complicated jobs.
I mean, I'm not an Egyptologist. I was mainly just using this for an example.
Yeah. All right. I'd be curious to figure out like what percentage of that was slave labor.
I don't think you'll ever know.
Yeah, I don't think we'll ever know either, but...
You probably a guess, but again, that's not the point of the podcast.
Sorry.
But you get the example, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, maybe people would answer differently, but I really think like they're just pyramids. Okay, sure, they're beautiful, but they're testaments of suffering, and in the slave scenario at least. So I think that just is a good example.
And that argument boils down to, sometimes it boils down to one person's suffering is worth the millions of people's enjoyment of the art, or however many people end up enjoying the art, if it's only one person that ends up suffering, but we're going to go with that assumption.
Yeah, there'll be plenty of examples where it's more than one person.
Yeah, but they usually boil it down to this because, like, for example, they'll say that, they'll hear stories about what happened and be like, that specific person suffered, you know?
Right. Now, if there's a single artist making a piece of art and they suffer to make their art and they make the conscious decision to do that, to me, that becomes an issue of like, not quite suicide, but maybe self-harm or something.
Yeah, and that's, to a point, their choice.
Right. And with that, I think you can have a nuanced discussion like you would with self-harm or suicide, because there's an element of choice in there.
Yeah, but if you're causing suffering to other people, causing harm to other people, then that's really inexcusable.
Definitely. And I think that's where the crux of this issue really lies.
And with that argument, like, you're just assuming that there will be lots of people to enjoy the art in the first place.
That's true. I mean, we have examples. You can look through history of like examples of art that made it big and art that caused suffering. But that's retrospect. You have hindsight, right? When you're looking to the future, you don't know that your art's going to be a masterpiece, that it's going to be good. How many stories do you think there are that we don't know about, that are people of causing suffering to make good art and it turned out to be terrible and not worth it? I mean, just look at any bad movie.
Yeah, you're right, actually. That's very important to think about.
Actually, you know what? I think I have an example.
What?
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. You want to finish that thought?
You're just assuming that it's gonna even out in the end, that the ends will justify the means, but that's a big assumption to make.
Yeah, that assumes you get to the ends that you want to get to.
Yeah.
But the example I have is there was that animated gross food movie a few years ago. What was it? Sausage Party.
Oh, God.
I never saw it.
I did.
Okay.
I did. It was one of the worst experiences in my life because
okay, but
I when I went to go see it, I went to go see it with my mother.
Oh my goodness, that was such a bad idea.
I know. I didn't realize that it would be that bad of a movie. Well, the ending was the worst.
Well, I haven't seen it, so let me just ask you, pick your brain for a minute before I get to the example.
Yeah, all right.
Was the reason it was bad just because the content and the subject matter was gross and disturbing? Because I feel like in a way it was kind of meant to be a horror movie. Or was it bad on like a critical and analytical matter? Like it had bad storytelling, it was just shock value, it had a bad ending, bad character development, it had immature humor. Was it that kind of stuff?
Yes, both. I mean, on a visceral level, it kind of grossed me out. But the thing is, I was kind of on board with it.
With the theme of the idea from the trailer?
Yeah, until the ending. And then the ending was just like, okay, this is just gratuitous. Like, it's awful. Yeah.
Okay, so I believe most people have the same idea you did, because after the movie came out, I heard almost next to nothing about it. It's not one of those movies that really stayed in people's minds and social media and online and just in pop culture, I guess.
Yeah.
But there was one report that came out after that movie. And it was a report that the animators, the CG artists, the people behind making the movie were extremely underpaid and overworked.
That's insane.
That they made the movie on less than, I don't remember the number, but it was some small amount of dollars, X number of dollars budget that was completely ridiculous. And the movie was actually a financial success despite the low critical ratings, because they had simply spent so little on the budget because they underpaid their workers. It was this big scandal and controversy.
Oh my God, that's terrible. That movie was not fucking worth doing that.
Exactly. And that's what they thought, that it might be worth it.
You know what? I bet they didn't even think it would be worth it. They just thought, oh, we'll make money from this, so that's worth it.
Well, yeah, I would be willing to bet their true intentions were money, but how much you want to bet that those artists were told that this will be worth it? You got, I mean, I know what it's like to work on crunch time where you have to come in every day, go work on the weekends, stay late, really late, and you're told like, oh, we got to do this to get the project done. It's going to be worth it. Mm-hmm. And then it's not.
Yeah.
And then you don't get paid for it.
Yeah. You had to work until like midnight one night. I remember that.
I once did it till 3 a.m.
What?
Yeah. And then...
you never came home.
And my boss said, you know what? You could wait until 9 to come in the next day.
9?
No, 10, sorry.
10?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I remember that because you came home. And, like, when you came to bed, you woke me up and I was just like, what? Why? I tried to stay up until you got home, but I couldn't.
Yeah, so I know what that's like. And I think that's a good example of you know, a CG animated movie these days that got enough notoriety to rival Pixar. But it wasn't Pixar. Mm-hmm. And it, you know... just went away because it wasn't worth it. You can't predict what will be worth it. Maybe if you throw enough money, you got enough notoriety, you might be able to think that you are, but you'll never know for sure.
Mm-hmm. Because as you may say, oh, well, it made this much money, so it was worth it. But the true value in art is...
Okay, if you're going to use the money argument, then you've completely shot yourself in the foot. Because this entire argument is that art is worth the suffering. Not is money worth the suffering, because there's already a resounding no to that.
Yeah, that's true, actually. Yeah, you're right. So, you know those animators who were overworked and underpaid? I wonder how many of those felt burnt out and may have even quit the industry after that. And
very much.
Yeah, and you have to wonder, those artists, those animators, would they have gone on to make better animation and better art had they not gone through that and been burnt out?
And we'll see that with many of our examples where the people that are given the suffering could have gone on to made more art.
Yeah, they could have gone on to do something better with their lives.
Yeah, and like we'll talk with Hitchcock specifically when we get into more examples, but I feel like a lot of people think, oh, well, yeah, these people are working really hard and sacrificing their personal lives to be able to make this happen, but it'll be worth it. This art will touch so many people in the end. We're going to get Psycho. We're going to get, what was it, Birds?
Yeah, the Birds.
We're going to get, you know, Van Gogh. We're going to get that movie, that animated movie.
Yeah.
I don't want to say the name again. Mm-hmm. It's going to be worth it. And you have to stop and say, what could have been here? What art could have been in this place? Even if the suffering was necessary to get the work done. Like if you treated people properly, this piece of work would have never been made, right? Because maybe you have to, you know, actually pay them and have a budget, right? Mm-hmm. Then maybe, okay, fine. We don't need this art then, right?
Yeah.
Maybe something else would be in its place. Mm-hmm. Like maybe if Hitchcock didn't, like,
we can talk about that later.
Okay, fine.
Yeah. All right. So, you mentioned Vincent Van Gogh, right?
Yes, right. Oh, Van Gogh, I think is actually.
Van Gogh. Yeah. Sorry. You mentioned Vincent Van Gogh. Actually, you said Van Gogh. You did.
I was correcting myself.
Oh, I thought you were correcting me. But Vincent Van Gogh, people like to romanticize his mental illness and his torturous existence and be like, oh, we got so much good art and paintings out of his mental illness. And it's just like, yeah, we might not have gotten those paintings if he had therapy and the medication we have today, but he would have lived a longer and happier life. And you don't know, maybe he would have still painted better things. And
if not, I think that would be a sacrifice that would be fine to make for the man's happiness. Mm-hmm. And okay, yeah, sure, we would have lost that, but I'd argue that someone else would have come along to invent Expressionism. That's what he invented, right?
No, I think it was Surrealism.
I forgot.
I forgot too. I
talking.
don't know art terms. Okay. And actually, specifically with this, I wanted to bring up the thing in Doctor Who where they literally went back in time and met Van Gogh, and they showed him how
he was an impressionist. That's
impressionist. Okay. By the way, pull up the sales numbers for Psycho and the Bird, please.
Okay.
Yeah, because I want to say something about that. But in Doctor Who, they go and show him how appreciated and how amazing his art becomes. And they think, oh, this is going to make him so happy. He'll go back and make much better. He'll make more art. There will be new paintings. And then they go back to the museum, to the Van Gogh exhibit, and there are no new paintings. And I think it really shows that, I think that just really shows that his suffering wasn't worth it. You know? I would have, they tried to make him a happier person, and then they went back and he never painted any more paintings. He still committed suicide. And it's just like...
Well, killed himself.
Yeah, he still killed himself. And it's just like, that's just really sad that that's how his life ended, because he didn't have the help and medication he needed. And actually, specifically, people like to bring up, there's this one time where he drank yellow paint because he wanted the happiness of yellow paint inside him. And it's just like, he was suicidal. He was trying to kill himself. That was lead paint.
Yeah, I think, yes, he was mentally ill, and yes, he made beautiful art. Those things are true. The problem is the romanticization of it.
Exactly. That's the problem with it. Because it's like...
Because it's almost in a way justifying it. I think this kind of goes with the trope of like the savant, you know? Where someone is tortured in a certain way.
But that makes them the tortured genius who's the only one who can rise above everyone else and be better than everyone else.
Yeah, so it's like, oh, well, it's okay you're this way. In fact, it's encouraged. Be more like this. Mm-hmm. I feel like there's a lot of shows that have such a character, like the character House from the show House. He's supposed to be like a brilliant doctor, but he's kind of a drug addict.
Yeah, he is.
Or he's a drug abuser, let's say. Mm-hmm. And I think any humanitarian would say, get that man some help, get him some treatment. He'll be healthier. He'll be happier. And if that does affect his acumen for diagnosing people, that's fine. There's plenty of other qualified doctors in the world. Mm-hmm. I feel like this could be tied to like the great man theory of history, where people think that a lot of history is caused by a single person at the right time, in the right moment, in the right place. When in reality, most scientific theories that we have suffered cogenesis, where two different people theorize the same thing at different time, the same thing around the same time. You know, Alexander Graham Bell is often credited for inventing the telephone because he filed a patent for it. He was the first person to do it. But Elias Gray filed the patent for a telephone in a completely different city 4 hours later, and therefore he didn't get the invention.
Wow, that's insane. Because we like to romanticize and give the credit to, oh, this one great man changed history forever. Because we like that romantic story of one person changing history, one person being the hero. And it's just like, that's not reality. That's not usually what happens.
Yeah, I would even argue that we could have gone without Einstein. Now, Einstein did a lot, and so I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't have Einstein. That maybe it could have taken decades for someone else to figure out what he did. But I think it's inevitable that someone would have.
Yeah, I agree with you there because, like, that's just like it's not like people weren't working on it.
Now, I do want to make clear though. I don't think that people are just completely replaceable and whatnot. You know, I don't.
No, you're just saying that they weren't the only person for the job. They weren't the only person who could have thought of this.
Exactly. Like, without Einstein, I do think there would have been much of a setback, but I don't think humanity would have just been lost, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I get what you mean, because humanity always finds a way to continue and always finds a way to persevere. So I think with that trait of humanity, someone would have figured that out.
And, you know, Einstein, he caused suffering himself. I mean, he didn't do art, he did science, but, you know, he cheated on his wife.
Oh, that's sad.
Yeah, that's suffering.
Yeah.
But it's not exactly the direct example we're talking about now. So why don't we get back to Hitchcock?
Yay. All right, now we can actually get into the thick of it with Hitchcock.
All right.
By the way, our reference for all this stuff about Alfred Hitchcock is Behind the Bastards, which is a very well-researched podcast. So you can look up that episode to see the sources where they got all this information.
Yeah, because this is kind of rebuttaling the whole argument, the logical or emotional argument of whether it's worth it. We did do some of our own research in addition to this, but let's talk about Hitchcock, because he made his actresses in his movies suffer just to make the movie. Like, you look at these movies like, oh, that's beautiful. Like, do you realize how much those women had to suffer behind the movie? Because he was vindictive about that.
Oh my God, yes. And you can't really separate Hitchcock from his movies because his...
Well, I mean, to go back to the Death of the Author, I'm sorry, it's just the word separate strikes a chord with me, because we talked about in Death of the Author that you can separate it.
You can, but I feel like in this case, there's so much of him in the movies as a director
I think you can, but you shouldn't, because we can't encourage this type of behavior.
Yes, because they talked about on that Behind the Bastards episode how there was a theme in his movies of young, beautiful blonde women being tortured and horrible things happening to them and stuff like that, and how that actually came from a place of his blonde, good-looking mother, you know, vindictiveness against her. And yeah, so I just wanted to mention that.
So, like, with the Psycho scene, the shower scene, the famous shower scene in Psycho, you know, that one where she's in the shower and there's a knife and whatnot. He made the actress, what was her name? Was it Tippi Hedren?
No, that was the other woman.
So this is someone else?
Yeah, this is someone else.
Okay, don't remember her name, sorry. But he made her stand in the shower for hours at a time. The scene took 7 days to film. It ended up causing her such PTSD that the actress never took a shower again in her life, preferring baths until she died.
She lived until 77.
Yeah, she was a young 20-something actress.
Yeah, so that was like 50 years where she only took baths after this. And
because he was such a perfectionist that he had to get it looking just right. Mm-hmm. But also, I mean, considering some of the other stories we heard about him, where one time for a prank he chained a guy to the camera set.
Yeah. Okay, I wanna tell this story.
I think he's vindictive. Yeah, sure, go ahead. I mean, again, source behind the bleeps.
Yeah, Behind the Bastard source. But he was this is just to give you an idea of what an awful man he was. So he played a prank on one of his, I think it was a cameraman, someone working on this set, where he offered them money to be chained to this a set, like a pipe on set for a night, overnight. And he gave him, I think it was bourbon. Was it bourbon or whiskey?
Some type of alcohol.
Yeah. And he gave him that to help him get through the night.
But he laced it with laxatives.
He laced the alcohol with laxatives. So in the morning, the crew came in to find their coworker chained with just diarrhea everywhere on the floor. Him sitting in his own diarrhea for the whole night.
And you can probably guess that person never worked in Hollywood ever again.
Absolutely.
He wouldn't be able to face his coworkers, the shame of it.
Yeah.
And Alfred Hitchcock never got any reparation because of that.
Oh, yeah. He never got reparation for, like, a lot of his pranks.
But is that exactly surprising in America?
No, it isn't, especially with him.
I mean, I can't help but think of Weinstein and just how much monumental effort it took to take him down.
Yeah.
And even then, nowadays, people are going like, is this too much? No. It's not even 1/10 of 1% the way there yet.
Yeah, exactly.
And like we're talking about with this episode, if you cause suffering, get out, go away, get rid of you. There's a million people in line behind you that could do the job better without causing that suffering.
Exactly.
How many brilliant directors are there that
That
won't change someone in their diarrhea?
Or that wouldn't have...
Like, what's a good director? Come on, we can name one, right? I don't know a lot of directors' names.
I don't
Who
know.
made Wonder Woman? That was a woman who made that, right?
Yeah.
Her.
Yeah, sure. Jordan Peele.
Oh,
He's a great director.
there. Yes, we thought of one.
Yeah, he's a great director.
Yes.
All right. So yeah, that scene in Psycho took 7 days to film, by the way.
Yeah, we talked about that.
Yeah. No, I want to mention something else about that. So in a shower scene, you have to look like you're naked, even if the camera doesn't actually show your bits.
Yeah, so sometimes they'll wear like flesh-covered, colored clothing and whatnot.
Yes. Well, the actress had to wear just like a moleskin thing over her private parts and her breasts. Except sometimes with the water and the long filming,
They would fall off.
yeah, and it was either stop and have to completely start over or continue and leave herself exposed.
Well, no, Hitchcock would insist that they keep rolling.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah.
So basically, even though they were supposed to avoid getting actual, nude images of her, they got nude images of her anyway.
Yeah, they
Without
got
her
that
consent.
footage. Like, obviously that footage wasn't in the final cut, but
Hitchcock
it
had
exists
it.
somewhere. Yeah.
I mean, what other scenario? Like, if you took a picture of a woman's naked body without her permission, or you coerced her or forced her to do so, what is that called?
It's assault.
Yeah.
So, yeah, she would have to just keep rolling. All right. And now we're going to talk about the climax of his assault, of his horribleness. The actress Tippi Hedren, who was basically owned by Hitchcock and eventually assaulted directly by him for almost her entire film career. Her debut was in the movie The Birds, and in the climax of the movie The Birds, she's supposed to get attacked by birds. They lied to her and told her mechanical birds would be used. And then she was forced to endure 5 days of live birds being thrown at her and almost lost an eye before she was even allowed to take a week off of filming.
Yeah, and she still had scars from that.
Yeah, she did.
And she's an actress who's like, her face is her livelihood.
Mm-hmm. She's still living, by the way. And her children are,
Okay.
Her children are actors, are I think she has a daughter who's an actress.
Okay.
But yeah.
But yeah, she was. They lied to her when you get the movie. Like, how would you like it if you were going to, go work at a McDonald's just to make a blue collar comparison, right? Mm-hmm. And then you get there, and it turns out all they make are onions, right? Mm-hmm. And you're like, that would have been nice to know because my eyes are bleeding now. Mm-hmm. I might have brought some goggles, or said no because I don't want to work with onions. Mm-hmm. I feel like this is a terrible example, but because I don't feel like onions and eyes bleeding.
Well, look. Let's say you're a construction worker who's going to work on a construction site, and as far as you know, everything's up to code and they have good processes. They good on their safety, and then you show up, and the reality is
they cut corners everywhere.
Yeah, they cut corners everywhere. It is an accident waiting to happen. And you're like, I don't want to work on this job site because I didn't realize my safety would be compromised.
But now you've already cleared out any other job opportunities you've had. You committed to this one. You're already
And you
there.
need the money.
Yeah. Or if you reject this guy, the guy who's in charge of the construction site is such a famous name in your industry that if you reject him, your career's over.
Yeah. Yeah. And
I mean, to relate to Weinstein again, he would blacklist people.
yeah, I know. And it's just terrible what this actress had to go through. Oh, another story about this actress. Hitchcock sent a very realistic doll of her mother, of her dead mother in a coffin, like a corpse version of her mother in a coffin.
Being attacked by birds.
Yes. Oh no, like after she was attacked. It was like...
Right.
Yeah.
As if she had been killed by the birds.
Yes.
And it was supposed to be some type of prank gift or whatnot. Sent it to her daughter, terrified her.
Yeah.
That was fun. No, being
Yeah.
facetious. So the next... you say this part, Kira.
All right, so during the filming of his next movie, which was, I think, Margaret, Hitchcock basically nonchalantly told her that she was basically expected to become his sex slave. And the exact words were that she was informed that she was supposed to make herself sexually available whenever and wherever he wanted.
Yeah, he really thought he owned her.
Mm-hmm. And she refused, so he blacklisted her in the industry and tanked her career in retaliation. And that is why that movie, Margaret, is like one of the last movies is the last movie I think she ever did with Hitchcock, and one of the last movies she was ever in.
I mean, people say, like, why didn't you come forward? Why didn't you say something? This is why. Mm-hmm. This is exactly what we were talking about, what she would fear would happen. And then she stood up to him, and it's what did happen. Mm-hmm. So I have to ask, this bird movie and this Margaret movie, is that what you said it's called?
Yeah.
And are these movies worth it? Is the beauty they have in whatever cinemaphile type of way, is that worth the suffering? We say no. Because, imagine how many more movies Tippi could have contributed to. Imagine if she got...
By the way, that's not her real name. He had her change it.
Oh, yeah. But imagine how many more movies she could have made if she managed to work with another director or just went on her own, even if they weren't as popular because it didn't have his name brand attached to it. Imagine the art she could have created as that famous actress.
Yeah, I'm not sure how many more movies she was in, but even as she was, like, none of them were as famous or advanced her career as much as the one she was in with Hitchcock.
Well, it's because of him blackballing her.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's like the animators we were talking about. How many of them got burned out?
Mm-hmm. And just decided to quit the industry because they felt like this is just going to happen again.
And then you could make the argument, because this is coming to my mind now, maybe Hitchcock would be like, oh, but women like her are a dime a dozen. You think she's special? I can just use her, wear her out, and then there'll be another one here to take her place, and that we can keep going like this. We're not losing anything by doing this. If you were to make that argument, because I could kind of see how you could use that logic, right?
Yeah.
Then you're essentially saying that you have an institution based on causing suffering to people, like it's a machine, like they're just tools to be used.
Yeah, that you're basically saying that women are disposable because they're pretty and can act.
In this specific case, yes.
Yeah.
And that's why I think this is such a terrible idea, that it essentially gives people like him license to keep doing this.
Exactly.
So, like, at any given point after he makes Psycho, it's like, okay, this is a great piece of art, apparently.
Well, and the main thing about Psycho is that it changed the horror genre. There weren't any slasher flicks.
I'm just not going to give it an unequivocal praise.
Oh,
but
yeah, I know.
Apparently, a lot of people like it.
Yeah, I've never seen it, and I don't think I would like it either.
It's before a generation.
Yeah, but just people say that, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm sure someone would have come up with the slasher genre eventually, and even if they didn't, who really cares if you lose the slasher genre?
Well, sure, but my point was, like, when that movie came out, it's like, oh, that's a great movie. I don't approve of what you did to make it, though. Don't do it again. Because, again, we're not going to just approve of you torturing people for movies. That's not okay. But then he did it again and again and again and again.
Actually, a lot of people didn't even know that this stuff was going on because the actresses didn't speak out until decades later about what happened.
Okay, but there were people on set.
Oh, that knew what was going on.
There were people with power.
Yeah, you're right. All the people complicit in allowing this to happen.
There's so many complicit people, and in some regards, it's hard to take down some of those complicit people because some of them are victims. And some of them are predators. Yeah,
because a victim in that example would be, I would love to not be complicit in this and to come forward, but I would lose my job and I can't risk that. Yes. Because I need it to survive. And in that case, I can understand putting your absolute need to survive and have a job before coming forward and having to do that, especially since that would be a really difficult thing to do in the first place.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, by the way, can we see how much did The Birds gross?
Well, I have Psycho and The Birds. So Psycho made $32 million.
Worldwide box office. So basically, that actress's mental health was worth $32 million. Congratulations, America. That's the price tag on a woman's mental health.
I mean, I hope we don't have to argue about, we're talking about, is art worth it? We don't need to argue about is money worth it, right? You people aren't complete psychopaths listening to this, correct? Come on, I believe in my fan base to not have to argue the point that you should not get money for killing someone or taking their life or emotionally taking their life or causing their suffering and mental illness. That's not even a debate, right?
Yeah. How much did The Birds make?
That's weird. It's not as thorough. I have $11 million here.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, $11 million. But that's how much Hitchcock thought he could own her. He thought because he could earn $11 million for the executives that he could own Tippi Hedren. And he basically acted like he owned her for that time period. He kept tabs on her. He literally told some people on set to follow her and take pictures and keep him updated on what she was doing when she was not on set. And even her being off set was a rare thing because he would force her to be on set for everything.
So in response to Behind the Bleeps with Robert Evans, he would say something, I don't remember his exact words, but he was kind of quantifying his monstrousness with the art he produced and how it's kind of a hard issue. I don't think that's the case. It's not a hard issue. It's cut dry, plain and simple. It's wrong. It doesn't matter what you get out of it. It doesn't matter if it's money. It doesn't matter if it's art. That's not okay. There would have been some other person to redefine the horror genre. And you know what? It may have been done without nearly as much misogyny.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I completely agree with you there.
Man, I should have ended the podcast on that note. But we got a little bit more to talk about because this isn't just an ancient thing in the past. This still happens.
Mm-hmm. The most recent examples of this is in the video game industry. And you were talking about those animators who were overworked and underpaid, but animators and stuff who work on video games.
It's a regular thing for them.
Yeah. Exactly. And they have to work unpaid overtime to get it done because they're considered salaried, which means they don't get paid overtime if they're salaried.
Well, they're like salaried contractors, so they could...
Oh, yeah. The worst case scenario I've seen of this, we've seen stories of this, is that there are salaried contractors, which means they don't get paid overtime, but they're contractors.
So they could get fired at any moment without notice.
Yeah. Work insane, up to 100-hour weeks to get a game out on time. And then they just let their contract expire at the end of the project, and they don't have a job anymore.
Yeah, so this is why why like different times of the year are better for hiring, because game companies will hire a lot of people to get the game done, and then right after the game ships, lays them off. This is what part of the reason why it's so hard to get in the industry, and I'm speaking so personally in this regard, because half the time companies are just rehiring the other game devs and artists that were already laid off. So if you're just trying to get into the industry and you don't have games on your resume, or at least AAA games on your resume, then good luck getting in, because they got 1,500 other people that all worked for some Activision company trying to just get their job back.
Mm-hmm. And they have to just go from project to project because this stuff happens.
Yeah, you had an example you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, an example is Rockstar Games' Dan Houser, who was, I think, a co-founder of Rockstar Games. I forget what position he had.
I think VP.
Yeah. He bragged on Twitter, I believe, that people were working 100-hour weeks to get Red Dead Redemption 2 out.
He bragged like it was a good thing, and a lot of people did not take it that way.
Oh, yeah. Like, video game fans were abolishing him, where he got a lot of backlash for that because people were like, no, that's not okay. Just delay the game.
Yeah. People are like it was Miyamoto who said that a delayed game is good eventually, a rushed game is bad forever. Mm-hmm. And while that's less true with the age of, day one patches
and video games as a service,
yeah, I still feel like that idea is important, even if Miyamoto's a bit overrated in my opinion. Mm-hmm. Because you shouldn't brag that people were having to work round the clock. That really just says to poor management. Mm-hmm. I understand crunch time always inevitably happens, but really bad crunch time means really bad planning. Mm-hmm. Or the deadline was too rushed. But again, bad planning. That's I would say that's a form of bad planning.
Yeah, and I read about this. What happens is that, okay, you send off this thing to get approved, like this character or whatever to get approved, and they'll come back and be like, okay, you have to redesign this whole character. This isn't going to work. So now you have to fit in all the work to redesign that character somehow with the same deadline and having to do all that work.
Well, I mean, the reasons for having to work that time can vary considerably, but...
Yeah, I know. But that will happen, and it's just like, you should understand that you are asking... I think a lot of the problem is that executives and producers and stuff ask for that work to be done, and they have no fucking clue how much effort, time it takes to do the work. And so they'll say, okay, you got to get this done, and we're not moving the deadline, by the way. So that really leaves them in a position to either crunch, cut something else, or do whatever. Like, those are their only options. Because they can't go to their producer and be like, no, this is unreasonable. You push the deadline or this isn't getting done. They can't do that.
Mm-hmm. And, maybe if they were paid fairly, I could almost understand crunch time. But even with crunch time, you have to have some personal time or you'll go crazy. Mm-hmm. Like, I've been on the fringes of the game industry for a long time. And, we've made a game together and we're working on another one. Mm-hmm. We want to break into it and we're trying. Mm-hmm. That's why I was able to be so frustrated earlier. But I've talked to people who are into the industry. And there was this one person I talked to. I think he was from Ubisoft or Naughty Dog. I forgot, but he was working on a AAA game, and he said something that I thought really struck a chord with me. He said that he knew people that were working on these games who would have a dog. They would specifically get a dog as a pet. That way, whenever they're on crunch time, they have an excuse to go home because they can tell their bosses, "I have to go home, or an animal will die. I have to feed a creature and go home." Mm-hmm. And using it as an excuse to be able to just leave the office for some amount of time.
Wow. That's awful.
The argument doesn't work so well with cats.
Well, I would say it does. You still have to feed your cats.
Yes, but I think people just aren't as forgiving and lenient towards cats.
Oh, yeah, I see what you mean.
Plus,
Like,
they are a
people
bit more self-sufficient.
a bit more, but come on, they still need to be fed.
True, very true.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I just feel like that's really telling.
And this isn't the only time this has happened. There have been other stories of game companies bragging about how many hours they're making their people to work to get their game done on time. And they almost always get such massive backlash because people are like, that's not okay. And I think the people who are bragging about it are so out of touch with reality that they're to the point where they're in that capitalist bullshit world where, oh, I'm going to brag about how hard I work because that means I'm an amazing person because I work that hard. And it's just like, no, you just don't have a life or are forced not to have one because of your job.
Well, I think it's games as an extension of the tech industry, and that, especially in America, we have this delusion about the tech industry and it being this noble enterprise that's an absolute good, and not recognizing it for being one of the largest, corporate industries in the world. I mean, some of the largest companies are tech companies. So I think we look at it like, imagine if it was some clothes company, right? That makes clothes. And they're saying like, oh yeah, we got sweatshops working 80-hour weeks to be able to get this done in time to make our next deadline. People would be appalled.
Yeah.
Rightfully so. But with tech companies, it's like, oh, it'll be worth it. We'll get the next iPhone. It'll be totally worth the slave labor to mine those minerals. Which is a thing that happened.
Yeah.
Even with the Wii U, there was allegations that Nintendo was using slave labor.
Oh, really?
Well, contracting slave labor.
Yeah. That's how it always works.
Exactly.
It's never directly the company. It's, oh, we don't know what our contractors are doing. We can't be held accountable for the people we contract. Even though they should and can.
Yeah.
Down with capitalism.
Where we went down quite a hole on that one. I don't know.
Yeah.
Don't know where to go. I mean, we talked about how like products and even sandwiches and stuff can be considered art. So I feel like this argument can be used for a great many things.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But oftentimes I think you were right at the very beginning that the whole argument of the art being worth it is just a veil to cover the real purpose, the money.
They can't, no one can say, oh, the money will be worth it.
Because most people will see that as evil.
Yeah, and greedy and crap. So what they say instead is, oh, the art. That's their excuse. Even though when you look at the numbers, the art is sure as hell making them millions of dollars.
I mean, I can't get a job in the entertainment industry unless I say up front that I'm willing to work extra and work late. They just won't even consider me.
Yeah.
So it's built into the system now as an expectation. See, this is why unions are supposed to be important.
Yeah.
But it seems like I remember the only union I even know of in the game industry is the voice actors union.
Oh, yeah.
Because of their connections to, regular actors.
Yeah, and the actors have a union.
Yeah. I guess writers, but that's more in the movie industry.
Yeah.
And, those worked. The people go on strike, they get better treatment. And it ensures, I should have mentioned this with the sweatshops, but we talk about, this crunch time in video games, right? Mm-hmm. But oftentimes those are just ones we hear about when they do it in the West. They do it all the time in third world countries without telling anyone.
Oh, yeah. There's
a reason that so many people in the Philippines or in India or in other, third world countries have like branches of the game companies working there because they know they can pay them less, make them work more because they're just so the people in those positions tend to be so desperate to be given a chance to work on one of these games. Mm-hmm. I know what that's like, honestly.
Yeah, I know you do.
So, Kira, I think we'll wrap this up a little bit early.
Yeah.
I just want to ask you, is there ever a situation where causing suffering to others is going to make good art? Is there ever a time when that art could only have existed because of that suffering and never would have been replaceable by a piece of art made by a kinder, more gentle person who would not have caused such suffering. Is it ever worth it?
No.
No, it's not. I'm Kyle.
I'm Kira.
Oh, wait, almost forgot something I needed to say at the end. One, we have a correction for our Christmas episode. When we were talking about the illustrator and Coca-Cola, we were kind of conflating two things. So it seems there's this guy named Thomas Nast who was the original illustrator of the modern Santa. Then that was used in the Coca-Cola one. So we forgot to explain that, look it up to learn more, and we're really sorry about that mistake. Secondly, we wanted to reiterate what we mentioned at the top of the episode. Please help us on Patreon. You get rewards like reading the notes and the timelines and voting on stuff, and bye.
Bye.